Hey everybody, welcome to News from Heaven. This is the show where we try to figure out life and the mind by taking an annotated journey through the writings of Swedenborg. And today, we're going to look at the Bible's secret code. And we're going to break that into bringing the truth to life, the marriage, how things go together, and then the Bible code. And what's up with this book that's captivated the world and yet is very confusing and at times seems ambiguous and ill-equipped to be divine revelation? Is there a way you can peer into a pretty obvious pairing of things to find out just how there might be more in something like that? And how does that relate to the way that ideas and love is stored in each one of our minds? That's the Swedenborg experience. Like and subscribe if you've been enjoying this show. That helps us get out. And how's it going this week? Let me know in the comments. Let me know how you like this program. Does this make sense to you? We need to hear from you. Leave a comment. Please do it. It's the right thing to do. Download Swedenborg's True Christianity. Scroll all the way down because this is where he really gets into a cool, succinct description of this Bible code. Go to 249. I know you've probably heard a lot of explanations of the Bible, but I feel like Swedenborg sticks out as this unique, intuitive yet complex and tied into the rest of life. I like it. We'll see how you feel about it. When the whole church, or just an individual within a church, and spoiler alert, that's so not what that term means, these are the same thing. Swedenborg says the church is not just a building that has a particular kind of ornamentation on it, whatever that might be, or it's got doors of a certain kind, or it has a Sunday school. The church is something inside you. There's a church in the heart, a church in the mind. And when those two go together, the church as a larger thing is just the conglomeration of individuals who act with love and wisdom. So when a whole church, or just an individual within a church, has truths, these would be ideas that are about higher spiritual things that are accurate. And we're getting hit right away with something amazing, in my humble opinion, here. The Lord flows into these truths with goodness and brings them to life. Right away, we have the truth brought to life. Wouldn't you think the truth is just a factoid, it's a statement of existence? You can't bring it to life. How would that even work? We go on. To put it another way, when people who are a part of a church, meaning there's multiple different ways you can have a church in the heart and mind all over the world, people have different kinds of internal churches. When people who are part of a church understand something true, the Lord, you might think it's enough. We got there, we understand something true, but that's not alive yet. This is how the life comes in. The Lord flows into their intellect and enlivens it by bringing goodwill into it. How do you make truth alive? You have to link what is true with what is good. This is the great duality in life, that you can have a head full of religious ideas, but you may still be a terrible person to be around, and those religious ideas may make you even worse because you use them as a way to, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying somebody, maybe you're watching right now, maybe myself, use those to make Thanksgiving miserable for everybody else, right? It's not enough just to have religious factoids. If the will hasn't changed, if the heart hasn't changed, the truth didn't do anything for you. We're not really seeing the truth for what it is, but God uses these truth points to flow in and bring them to life. And this has a lot to do with how you obtain truth from the Bible. We all have two faculties of life. We can't talk about something like sacred scripture without getting into how human consciousness is constructed. We have two faculties of life. Stop me if you've heard this before. Just kidding, I'll never stop. Called the intellect and the will. Those are the two things. When I talked before about a church in the heart, that's a church in the will. And a church in the mind is a church in the intellect. Our intellect is a vessel for truth. Vessel just meaning a container. So the intellectual part of your mind is meant to be this place where truth is stored, and therefore, progressively, for wisdom. And our will is a vessel for goodness, and therefore for goodwill. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got an intellect and a will, and it's not always a vessel for goodwill. A lot of the time it's a vessel for petty resentment and judgmental thinking. That's because we're not always in the order of life. But isn't it cool to think what we're meant to have emotions for is to let the primary emotion, which is love and goodwill, shine through. The point of the mind is not to assemble what is convenient for us to support our various hierarchical feelings towards other people. That this is meant to be a conduit for truth. This whole thing is supposed to be a welcome mat for God to come in. For us to become part of the church, again, it's an internal church. It's not about, are you registered with your local church of whatever kind? These two parts of us have to become one. The two parts do, in fact, and notice this whole two-part thing, right? We got two parts in the mind, two parts of goodness and truth. Hold on to that, because that's going to come back to haunt us in a little bit. The two parts do, in fact, become one. How do they become one? When we build our intellect with genuine truths. So you think about a mind. Yes, I am going to draw a profile of a human being. Okay, we have noses and a little bit of mouth. So now I was so concentrated on drawing that I forgot what I was talking about. When we build our intellect with genuine truths, so what you can have all kinds of thought ideas in the mind. You can think things that are totally untrue. You may well know people who adamantly post things that are untrue on social media, according to you. You can fill it up with all that, but really, it's not about that. It's about filling it with genuine truths. These would be spiritual. Sure, you can have earthly, accurate understandings of the best the human race has to offer, and those are important, but what's really going on is getting these spiritual principles, these insights into the nature of how things are, those scattered around the mind, right? So let's clear everything else out for now, focus on those. With those in there, the intellect, the thinking part of your mind can actually use these as sort of a foundation for what it's trying to do. We build our intellect with genuine truths, and this is the Swedenborg experience. I got to just highlight this in Swedenborg green. He's not associated with the color green at all. To all appearances, as if we were doing the building ourselves. This, we just did an episode about how to get power from God, and in there we talked about the need for acknowledging the partnership with God, but yet doing things on your own. It has to seem like we go out and get these truths that we just learn them, and we've got some kind of book we're reading them out of, and they come into us, and I've obtained this one, I went to the library, I studied, I went to some teacher, I got these, but actually God is doing this, or at least is the driving force. But it's really not about either in isolation. Something that's so important is this marriage. We're about to talk more about that marriage of us seeming to pull them from ourselves and God coming in and giving them to us. We're building the church in the mind. We're talking about the intellectual church right now. And our will is filled with the goodness of love. So here we get to the second part of these two parts here, with the goodness of love, which is done by the Lord. And that's cool to think about. I keep going the wrong way in these documents. Okay. Because you think about that in the mind, we seem to be doing a lot of the work. If you go out, maybe you go on YouTube, maybe you go to the library, maybe you read sacred text, and it seems like you're assembling your view of how spiritual reality works and your view of how regular reality works. You're assembling your picture of life. Swedenborg says God is involved in that, but the goodwill, so pretend this is the heart resides in the neck because I don't have the bottom part of the diagram. The goodwill here, that is the love that comes in. That is from God. That God is really the one doing that. You can't force yourself to feel love. Just like sharing. One time when I was little, my grandmother, after I'd been fighting with my sister, said to me, haven't you noticed that it feels much better when you're sharing with your sister? And I said to her, this is what she told me anyway, I've heard you say that, but I haven't noticed. So the love will come someday, angry young Curtis. So the goodness and love is done by the Lord. Then the life of truth, and we're talking about life, the life of truth and the life of goodness are in us. The life of truth in our intellect, which remember we were talking about before. The life of truth is in the intellect, and the life of goodness is in our will. When these two lives are united, they become one life, not two. This is the marriage between the Lord and the church. You have these two-part marriages and everything. Remember, we're talking about two parts. The two parts is linked to, instead of me trying to write it, I'll find it over here, marriage, right? The two parts are always in a marriage. You have a marriage between your intellect and your will. And you have this church, which, as you can see, there's a side over here, there's a side over here. What this really is this whole thing is a marriage between the good and truth in us and God. This is us marrying God in a little way. Didn't know God was our type, but that's how this connection happens. This is the marriage between the Lord and the church. It is also the marriage between goodness and truth within us. Whoops, jumped the gun. That's where that is, right there. Okay, we've got this whole setup. We've got the marriage. We've got these two parts and everything. Intellect, will. You came in here looking for something about the Bible's secret code. We had to have this groundwork because the code is everything about these two parts and everything about this marriage. And this is why when I try to explain Swedenborg to people, when this channel tries to explain Swedenborg to people, we always have to go all over and explain all these things because everything is interconnected, which isn't that how it should be. If you're trying to learn about biology, you also have to know about chemistry because biology is just the interaction of biological molecules. You got to know about physics. Everything that's real is interfacing with everything else. So if Swedenborg is actually describing spiritual reality, it would make sense that certain parts lean on other parts. We've got our parts here, specifically our two parts in our marriage. We're ready to apply that now to the thing we all came here for. Oh, that's a really bad looking drawing of the Bible. The Bible. Readers who pay attention can see that the Word, and this is, Swedenborg always calls the Bible the Word, has two-part expressions. We're talking about the marriage and the two parts and everything, the intellect and will in us. Well, if the Bible or the Word is divine truth, shouldn't it be talking on that fundamental level? The Word has two-part expressions whose elements seem to be repetitions of the same thing. Isn't that a problem? If you hear the Bible is so cool, this is God reaching down and talking to us, but it can go on, and at times it seems like, aren't you being redundant? Where's the divine in this? Swedenborg is saying it's divine because this is the pattern of life. They seem to be repetitions of the same thing. For example, and he gives a bunch listed here. You'll hear in the Bible, it'll say one and then the other, brother and friend, the poor and the needy. How often does it say the poor and the needy? Aren't the needy poor and the poor needy? Wasteland and desert, that's getting pretty close to each other. Emptiness and void, enemy and adversary, sin and wickedness. Why are there always these pairings of things? Anger and wrath. Nations and peoples. It'll always say the nations something something and the people something. What's the difference? Well, we'll tell you the difference. Joy and gladness, grief and weeping, justice and judgment, and so on. Look through the text of the Bible. You'll see this pairing everywhere in it. These seem like synonyms, when in fact, they're not. Well then, what are they? Brother, and here we get back to, we talked about the will and the intellect, the heart and mind in us, the two parts of the church. It's because the Bible's talking to both sides of that. Brother, the poor, the wasteland. This is the first element of these pairings he's been talking about. Emptiness, enemy, sin, anger, nations, joy, grief, and justice apply to goodness, or in an opposite sense, to evil. Goodness or evil both can appear, but it's all the will side. All that stuff is talking about the emotional side of us and of existence. Friend, the needy, desert, void, adversary, wickedness, wrath, people's gladness, weeping, and judgment apply to truth, or in the opposite sense, to falsity. So this is getting back to the intellect side. So when you hear about the friend, it's talking about something about this gathering process here of truth. But when it's talking about brother, it's talking somehow about the love coming in here. So this Bible, this old text filled with stories of people you're never going to meet and things that you don't understand how they apply to your life. It's talking about how God is partnering in your mind and your heart with you, right? So that's fairly relevant. Yet, it seems to readers who do not know this secret that the poor and the needy, wasteland and desert, emptiness and void, and so on, are the same thing. They are not, in fact, although they combine to form one thing. Why bother saying both? Why just not just have one word for both? There is something sacred, as we showed in the beginning, about a two-part partnership. This is something that occurs all through life. Swedenborg says there's something sacred about, remember just up here, it says, this is also about the marriage and truth in us. Where was it? Somewhere it says, when these two are united, they become one life, not two. That it's meaningful for us to have a mind and a heart, but that they become one thing. They're not one thing, but they link together as one thing. Similarly, you've got God and us. We are not the same thing, but we link together in such a marriage that we become the same thing. This is the pattern of love. This is what love is. Elsewhere, Swedenborg describes it as saying, love is the dwelling together of two different things as one. Slight paraphrase, but he wrote in Latin, so it could be exactly what he meant. That is what the pattern of life is. The combining to form one thing. That's what underlies everything. So that's why it goes through saying the poor and the needy, because it's talking not just about describing the scene, but about how the scene can grow together and how we can get this marriage that equals the church in all of us. In the word, there are also many things that are paired, such as fire and flame, gold and silver, bronze and iron. Do you ever wonder why are they sitting there and talking forever about how the specific ornamentation with which precious metals makes which part of a temple? This is all this detailed, like a deep textbook on how the mind and heart work. Wood and stone, bread and water, bread and wine. Why bread and water and bread and wine? These are two different stages in that development. Purple and fine linen and so on. Again, this is because fire, gold, bronze, wood, bread, and purple apply to goodness. And fascinating to see, what of that list, which one is fire? I could see that that's goodness, but bread is goodness? Well, Swedenborg says that's because bread is the mainstay of life, and goodness is what powers our consciousness. Like that is what keeps us alive. And then what are the counterparts? And it just brings this new appreciation for the quality of these objects, while flame, silver, iron, stone, water, and wine, and fine linen apply to truth. Something similar occurs when the word says, and this is sort of what it all gets at here, we have to love God with our whole heart and our whole soul. Why those two things? Wouldn't it just be enough to say, just love God all the way? But this is talking about when you come to love what's good and true, you do it and this diagram is getting mighty cluttered. I have no way to rectify that. Love God in the things you learn. And loving God means love what is honest, true, fair, and good. That's the essence of God. That as a person and the effects, everything that's good. You know what I'm talking about. I just don't want you to think like it's something abstract or out there. You already know the coolness of God. You got to love that. And it's the same thing. What I'm trying to get at is loving God is the same thing as loving kindness and altruism to the neighbor. Because in that, you're seeing the nature of God. Love God with the mind and with the heart. Understand and believe why doing right is good. And then love it for the effect it brings to other people. And that God is going to create in us a new heart and a new spirit. It just jumps off the page at you. Obviously, there's two parts to this. There's two parts in us, and they are together, the marriage that is the product of this Bible code as we understand it. Heart applies to the goodness, and this is where Swedenborg says correspondential thinking slips into everyday language because it's so fundamental to who we are that we talk about my heart. I feel that in my heart. Or my heart goes out to you, when your heart doesn't actually. There's not even any, we're not necessarily making emotions in the muscle of the heart, although there are some neurons in there as I understand, but we talk about it like that because it corresponds. That's why heart imagery means love, because we have this sense of, that's what the spiritual symbolism of the heart is. Of our love, while soul or spirit apply to the truth of faith. So we gather the information, we live it out. God brings it to life with this goodwill. There are also words that share in both goodness and truth. And this is so Swedenborg to embarrass me like this, where I've just been sitting here like laying out, it's all dual, it's all double, it's one and the other and one and the other. Life is big and complex. There are going to be variations, and there's these cool little caveats. Every generality he gives, lift that up and look for specifics under there. They are therefore stated alone without a connection to other terms. Now, it doesn't happen often, but when you do see it, you can look what has those both. So the marriage is so tight and so complete that even though there's two colors, I have no idea how these two are going to mix. That one doesn't even show up. They look like one thing. These and many other features, though, stand out only to angels. So we can't even see them. I don't know why I wasted your time telling you all this. I'll just finish this sentence. And to people who are aware both of the earthly meaning and the spiritual meaning at the same time. So we are dipping our toes into the spiritual meaning right here. So hopefully we can provide a foundation that lets us see the Bible like the angels do, as not something that's about wars in a far-off time, but something that's about the partnership and the marriage between us and God now. And that's the news from heaven. Was that cool? Did it get you thinking about the text in the Bible and the way things are in a different way? Did it get you thinking about your heart and your mind in the same way, in a different way? And did it do anything? Did it improve your mood? Even though we're talking about this technical kind of stuff, doesn't it paint a bit of a picture of a life that is more purposeful and more full of good news and a positive equanimity for everyone, or equifinality is what I'm talking about. The common, everyone's going to end up okay. Did that work? What did you pull out of it? Is there anything you can take from something technical like this into your daily life? That's what I really want to know, because I want to see what could you do with this throughout the week. If anything hits you, if this is helping you in your life at all, write it in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And if it doesn't help, that's fine. Let me know in the comments so I can figure out how to do it better next time. Thanks, everybody. Like and subscribe. Come on. Just do it. What's the worst that could happen? If you're subscribed, click the bell. That's what lets you know that we release new videos. And hope that until the next show, you're having a great time and you're seeing the love and the wisdom come together in you. Take it easy.